In this video, we are going to create a preview for the object that we want to place on our grid, and we are going to change its color whenever the position is invalid. Okay, let's get going. In our project, if we go to our prefabs, we have all those prefabs of the objects that we can place on our map. Now, if we drag one of those objects like this big bed parent to our scene view, we're going to see that it has a specific color applied to it using a material. Now, the object that has the material is inside the parent object, and it has 3 materials in the inspector. But the problem is that child objects of this bed double also have some materials. So to make this object transparent, we would need to swap all those materials to a transparent material. So to do this, we are going to go to our assets in the projects tab, and I'm going to select the shaders folder, right click, create, and we are going to create a new shader graph. I'm going to select the shader graph URP, and we can select the lit shader if you want this preview to be affected by light. I don't want this, so I will select unlit shader graph. Maybe let's call it transparent, maybe shader. Okay, let's double click on this to open this shader app, and we are going to create a very simple shader. So in the blackboard, we are going to use this plus icon to add a color, and we are going to call it base color. And if you select it, I'm going to drag here the graph, the node settings. We want to select the default color to be white, and we are going to set the alpha value to something like 100. We are going to use this alpha value for transparency. Now, one more thing that I want to do is change the reference to be underscore color instead of underscore base color. This is important because if you want to use material.color to set or change the color of our object using this shader, we can use this underscore color property, or basically this color will use the underscore color property, so the reference name. So if we have it in our shader, we can easily change the color of our material. And basically, this is the reason why I wanted to apply this reference name. We're going to use this to change the color of our object to be red or to be white, depending on the validity of the placement. Okay? So now, one more thing that I want to do now is change the graph settings. If we go here, we have the unlit material type, and we are going to select surface type to be transparent, since I wanted the preview object to be transparent so we can see through it, but we can also see its silhouette so that we know what we are placing. Okay, with those changes done, we can now drag our base color to our shader graph, and we are going to drag the output of this base color into the split node. And this is because we want to have the access to the alpha, so to the transparency. As you can see in our vertex shader, we have the alpha now because we have changed the type of the shader to be transparent. We're going to drag the alpha value from the split node to the alpha value of the fragment shader, and we are going to drag the base color value as the base color. And this is basically it for our transparent shader. So let's save the asset using the button, and let's go back to our inspector. Now, let's select in the projects tab our new shader, right click on this, create, and we are going to select material. And this will be our transparent material. Now, let's select the scene view, and we are going to select our bed big parent. Let's select the bed double, and here we have the materials. So let's select our mesh render, materials array, and we are going to drag instead of those materials here, the transparent material that we have created. And as we drag it, we are going to see in the scene view that part of our bed is now transparent and white. And if we select the transparent material, change the color to be red, as you can see, we can apply the red tint to the transparent material so that we can inform the player that this placement is incorrect. Basically, this is the idea that we are going to go with to create our preview for our system. Okay, for now, let's delete our bed big parent from our hierarchy, and we are going to have a custom script that will apply this material and change its color based on the state of our placement system or placement logic. So let's go to our scripts folder, right click, create a new C# script, and we are going to call it preview system. And let's open this script up. Okay. Now here we are going to have some fields. We're going to first define a serialized field private float preview y offset. It will be set to 0.06f so that we can place our preview object above our grid and above our grass plane, so that we can see it and it doesn't clip through our grass plane or our grid or our cell indicator. Now, below we are going to have a serious field private game object cell indicator. Previously, we had this in our placement system. This was the cell indicator that we had to show the cell that we are selecting. Now we are going to have it inside our preview system. Next, we are going to have a private game object preview object. This will be the reference to our object that we are going to use as a preview. So this will be the bed, big, or a chair, or whatever we want to place. Next, we are going to have a serious field private material preview material prefab. This will be the reference to our transparent material. And we are going to have a private material preview material instance so that we can instantiate this material so that we do not modify the asset inside our project, rather than we are going to instantiate it when we start our game. Great. Let's create a start method, and here we are going to call preview material instance equals, and we are going to call a new material, and we are going to pass the preview materials prefab. So I meant to call it material. Okay. So we are going to instantiate this new material. And next, as you might recall, we had hid the cell indicator whenever we are not in the placement state. So we're going to call cell indicator game object set active to be false, or actually we don't need to access the game object since this is already a game object reference. Okay. The next method that we are going to have is a public void start showing placement preview. And this will take a game object prefab. And this will take a vector to int size. Since, as you might recall, each object can be of different size and each can have a different prefab. Okay, so now what we want to do is instantiate our preview object. So we are going to type preview object equals instantiate, and we are going to instantiate the prefab. But this will give us the original material, so we are going to call prepare preview. And we are going to pass in the preview object reference. Okay, so let's right click on this method, quick actions, and generate this method. Besides that, we are going to also call prepare cursor, and we are going to pass the size. Again, right click, quick action, and generate this method. And this will be used to set the size of our grid preview so that we can show the size of our object. Now let's complete those methods. So in the prepare cursor, we are going to check if size.x is greater than 0 and size.y is greater than 0. First, set the cursor or cell indicator .transform.local scale, and we are going to set it to be equal to a new vector 3, and we are going to pass size.x, 1 as y, and size.y as the z parameter. Okay, so this will increase the scale of our cell indicator. Next, we are going to access cell indicator.getComponent in children, and we are going to access the renderer. And next, we are going to access the material, and we are going to set the main texture scale. So this is the tiling of our texture to be equal to be the size. So if we go to our project and select in our building system in the hierarchy the cursor indicator parent, what we will do is set the scale, for example, for an object of 2 by 2 size to be x to be 2 and z to be 2. As you can see now, the indicator is bigger. So to adjust for the size, we are going to select the cursor indicator which has the mesh renderer, and we are going to select the material, and we are going to select the tiling. So this is the scale of the main texture to be 2 by 2. So the effect will be that we are going to create this indicator to cover 2 by 2 area on our grid to indicate how big of an object we are placing. Okay, so similar thing we need to do with our preview object, but we need to swap the materials of our preview object that we have instantiated for the transparent material that we have instantiated here, that we have a reference here too. So let's go to our prepare preview, and what we are going to do is we are going to create a renderer, array of renderers equals, and we are going to access the preview object, and since every object has a parent object, we're going to access get components in children, make sure that you type this S in the middle because this will get an array of components, and we are going to access render. We can loop for each, and we are going to loop for each render in our renders. And here we need to access the materials of each render. So we need to access materials. So material array materials equals, and we are going to access render.materials. We are going to loop for, and I'm going to press tab twice to create a for loop. I'm going to loop for materials dot length, and we are going to now call materials with the index I equals, and we are going to assign to it preview material instance. So basically we are assigning to all the materials for this render our transparent material, and next we are going to call render.materials equals our materials array. Now this is important because now all the materials will reference this single preview material instance. So if we modify the color of this, it will modify all the colors of the whole object. By default, the color will be white, so we don't have to do anything right now, but it will be important when the placement is invalid. Now, one more thing that we didn't do is set the cursor to be active. So after we prepare the cursor, we can call the cell indicator.setActive to be true. So when we start showing our placement preview, we are going to prepare our preview of the object as well as the cursor or the cell indicator. Okay, that's great. So now the next method that we are going to have is public void stop showing preview. All we need to do here is set our cell indicator set active to be false, but we also need to destroy our preview object. So destroy, and we are going to destroy the preview object. Great. So last thing that we need to do is cover what happens when we are moving our cursor, when we are placing our object. We obviously need to update the position of the preview as well as to update the color depending on the validity of our placement. So let's create a public void. We are going to create an update position method, and this will take the vector 3, the position. So this is the position where we should place our object, and bool validity. So this will be the validity value. So if the placement is invalid, we are going to change the color of our preview to indicate it. So here what we are going to do is call move preview, and we are going to just pass the position. We are going to also move cell indicator or cursor, and we are going to pass the position again, and we need to apply the feedback. So apply feedback, and we are going to pass the validity. Okay, let's right click on all of those methods and generate those methods in our class. Okay, and let's go to our apply feedback. So what we can do here is create a color C equals, and we are going to check the validity question mark. So if the validity is true, we are going to return color dot white, else we are going to return color dot red. We are going to set the C, so the color dot A, so the alpha value to be 0.5. So this will be the transparency value that we apply to our preview object. And lastly, we are going to access the preview material instance dot color, and we are going to set it to be C. Now another thing that we should do is apply the same color to our cell indicator. But since this method can be called very often, what we can do is create at the top a render or private renderer, and we are going to call it cell indicator renderer. Now what we can do is grab it in our start method, so equals our cell indicator get component in children, and we are going to grab the renderer, and now we can use this reference to prepare our cursor. So instead of getting the render, we are going to call our cell indicator render material main texture scale equals size in our prepare cursor method, and below, when we have this apply feedback, we are going to apply this, so cell indicator render material dot color, and we are going to apply our color C. Now inside the move cursor, all we need to do is call our cell indicator dot transform dot position equals the position, and inside the move preview, as you might recall, we have created this preview y offset, so we are going to set the preview object dot transform dot position to be new vector 3, and we are going to pass the position dot x. We're going to add the position dot y plus the y offset, preview y offset, and we are going to pass the position dot z. Let me make it a bit more visible what we have put here. Okay, and this will be basically it. So I hope that I have typed everything correctly. So now we can save this class and let's go back to our placement system, because here we need to modify the script to start using this preview system that we have created. First thing that we can do is remove the cell indicator from the top of our placement system, since we are not going to modify it from this script. We're also going to remove the preview render reference, and in the start method we are getting this preview render, so we are going to remove this line as well. But we need to add a serialized field at the top, and we are going to add private preview system preview. Now let's slide down to the start placement. Here we have called cell indicator set active. Instead of this, we are going to call preview start showing placement preview, and what we need to pass here is the game object and the size. So here we need to call database, since this is our database of objects data. We are going to access selected object index.prefab, and as a second parameter we are going to call the same, but we are going to access the size. Okay, and now we are going to call here the logic that will show us the preview of an object. Great, let's slide it down, because now we are placing the structure, but we are stopping the placement when we call the stop placement method. And here we are going to, instead of cell indicator set active, call preview. We have stop showing preview, and this should call our logic to remove the preview from our grid. Lastly, we need to slide down to find the update method, and here we had this call to set the material of the preview and to move the preview itself. So instead we are going to remove those methods, and we are going to call preview update position, and we are going to pass grid dot cell to world, and we are going to convert the grid position, and we are going to pass the second parameter, so the placement validity. And this should be it for the changes that we need to show the preview of our object that we want to place. But there is one thing that I want to change. Now the update works constantly. So what we are going to do is we are going to ensure that when we are placing a structure in the place structure method, at the end, when everything is placed, we are going to call our preview update position, and we are going to call grid cell to world grid position, and we are going to call false, since if we have placed an object on this position, now the placement is invalid because there is already object placed here. Now this is great, but we are already going to call it when we call constantly the update method. So instead we are going to slide up to the fields of our placement system, and we are going to create a new private vector 3 int, and we're going to call it last detected position, and we are going to set it to be vector 3int.0, because basically this is where we are creating our placement preview at the start of our placement. Now we are going to reset this value when we are stopping the placement. So let's find the stop placement method, and we're going to set here the last detected position equals vector 3int.0. But the most important usage for this is in the update, since we are calculating the mouse position and the grid position, and then we are performing some expensive calculations. So instead of doing this, we are going to check if our last detected position is equals to the grid position. So basically, if we are selecting the same position as before, we are not going to do anything, else we can do this logic. So maybe instead, let's check last detected position is different. So exclamation mark equal grid position. If it is different, then we are going to perform all this expensive logic and set the last detected position equals the grid position. So this way, we are not going to update the preview, we are not going to calculate the placement validity again when we are pointing at the same position, when we are selecting the same cell again. Great, so I think this is it. Let's save it, let's go back to Unity. Okay, for now we are going to go to the hierarchy, building system, right click here, create an empty object, let's call this preview system. And I'm going to add to this the same component preview system that we have created. So we are going to need to have the cell indicator, so let's drag our indicator parent, and we need to have the preview material prefab. Let's go to our shaders folder, select the transparent material and drag it here. Great. Last thing that we need to do is assign this to the placement system, so let's select the placement system and drag here the preview system reference. Okay, if everything is done correctly, we should now be able to press play. Okay, so if we select some object like the floor, we can see now the preview of the object, and we can see that the preview changes when we are moving our object. We can now select the different object, and as you can see, the problem is that the cell indicator is a bit too big, but we can see that it all changes color based on the validity of our placement. So now this is working pretty nice. We can select different object, and again, everything should be working nice. So let's change the color of the cell indicator, maybe just for the sake of being able to see better the preview. Okay, so all we need to do is go to our preview system and slide down when we are calling the apply feedback. And let's apply to the cell indicator the same color that we are applying to the preview materials instance, so that now it will be transparent as well. Let's save this, let's go back to Unity and press play. Now we can more easily see the object that we are placing, although again, feel free to update the prefab of the cursor to make it a bit less intrusive. Okay, so this is it for this video. In the last two videos of this series, we are going to implement a way to remove objects from our map in such a way that we can place new objects at the same spots. Okay, see you in the next video.